Hello, this is a Backdrop CMS user group meeting for the 1st of August 2024. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. We're going to start with introductions before I move on to the topic for today, which is config management. So my name is Martin Price. I'm a Backdrop developer in North East England, United Kingdom. We'll go to Luke next.
Howdy, folks. I'm Luke McCormick. I'm a website architect and manager now in Martinez, California, which is near San Francisco. And I'll toss it to Tim.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim on the internet. I am in Minnetonka, Minnesota, down by the closer to the Twin Cities than usual, for the Minnesota Fringe Festival. This starts tonight, and so I'm a volunteer and fan. Joseph.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a developer from Las Vegas, Nevada. And yeah, I'm just here to see what everyone else is doing. And I think Irina's the last one.
My name is Irina Zaks. I'm working from South Bay area. And I hope that today I can, with everyone's help, thank you very much, move site from Pantheon to my local installation using correct configuration management process. And the key is here to say correct.
Okay, I didn't catch the last thing you said, but we've all introduced ourselves. So yes, this is the, and I'm sorry, I was a little distracted when Martin introduced us. This is the user group meeting. Today's topic is configuration management. And Irina has volunteered to get us going. But if anybody, once she's sort of talked about the way she does it, if anybody else has alternative ways that they use config management, they might share those as well. So Irina, it sounds like you're talking about this sort of a specific use case, and that would be great. I think, and obviously Irina is calling in from a coffee shop today, so we do have a little bit of background noise, and we'll just have to we'll bear with it. It'll be okay. You want to? Are you almost ready, Irina? Nod your head. Well, then go ahead and jump in. Show us how you do config management.
So I wouldn't say how I do my config management. I would rather say how I'm learning to do that. So I have here instructions that I'm supposed to follow, which I usually don't. And maybe that is the problem. So my hope is to do this more or less step by step. So it says create new site on Pantheon. Here's my site on Pantheon. There's live site. I have here code, database, and files. I have login to this site, and in the site I also have backup and live. Then I move to step 2, and this is my local setup where I have database. I have empty database. I have pulled the code, and this is where I am recording things that I am doing. So I have code, database, and I configured host. So then I go.
Irina.
Yes.
It just occurred to me that maybe for a user group meeting, we should do a quick clarification of what config is and why we're doing this. Is that do you want to do that?
Yes, I can say a couple of words. So configuration management is super amazing new feature that was not available in Drupal 7, but it is available both in Drupal 7 and in Drupal 10. And it addresses one of the major challenges that we were struggling in Drupal 7 when configuration and data were both stored in the database, and anytime we had to move anything, there was a big problem.
Right.
So what happened in both Drupal 7 and Drupal and Backdrop. Configuration management concept was introduced, and configuration management and Backdrop, both Drupalton and Backdrop have configuration manager in place. So that allows me, what is happening is, I want to go to single import. All the configurations are stored in the format of files. The files, I want to go expert, but it's thinking. And the files can be stored in Active Directory. And if we do things, so for example, if I want to look at my, let's look at my views. So here for every view, I have JSON file that will load in a minute. And then here, let's say I want to see it, whatever, research agenda description block. This is the configuration file that will load here. And it is, so this is configuration file, JSON file, that is stored in the format of the file in Active Directory. And this allows me to move from config always in database to ability, and I'm trying to find John's article, to save this configuration in one of those places, right? And then put them under Git. So here I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to do today is do step by step, make this thing step by step, and please correct me if I'm doing something wrong. So I have my local direct, so I've added all the things. I have all the code. My code base is ready. I have all the code that I need. And then the next step, I'm probably going to be following this instruction. I edit Pantheon file that I have in my directory. It's probably not shared in my screen, but I'm going to open it in VS Code, and I don't know if it's worth jumping from one place to another. So so I added this statement in the Pantheon YAML file. And then I'm gonna save it and commit it to, so now I need to commit this to Git because that's what I am trying to do, right? I'm opening my file set, and I can see that my Pantheon YAML file is updated. So I could go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and say, I wonder if there is link to this heading so I can reference it correctly. Yes, so this is code block, this is setting PHP. So I am gonna, the way I will reference it in my Git code will be, I will say, okay, this is step that I did here, nope, here. So class, this is class, this is not ID. DevDocs. So this was my class. So step DevDocs, I've added protected paths. I'm committing it to Git. And this step is done. Then the next thing I'm doing is I'm moving. Do I need to do anything here? Anyone who did it before? Okay.
I'm sorry, you're asked, was that a question for us?
Yes, it's a question for experts because it's just a note that the private is included. It's not the actual call for action. It's already in there. So then the next step is I need to update settings file. So I'm copying this code and adding it to my settings file that is in the top directory, where I have all the other configuration. I put it at the bottom after local settings.
So-
And
I wonder, Irene, if maybe it's also worth mentioning that some of these steps that you're talking about are very unique to the Pantheon situation, right? These are not things that you have to do in all development environments.
yes,
So just so to make sure people understand that, yeah.
yep. So I think that one of the reasons why I've chosen to do it on Pantheon is because
Mhm.
this is a very common hosting, especially for us in higher ed. And so there's lots of things that we will be doing that we will need to do to make this happen.
Yeah.
So then the next thing I'm doing, I'm updating settings. And I committed. And then the next step I'm doing configuration workflow. This is where I'm struggling. So here, and this is one of the reasons why it is important to do on Pantheon, because there's less trouble doing that on the local. So this is, I'm also adding this to my settings file. So my settings file is getting larger. And this is step where I'm adding staging. And so this is what I have now. So files directory cannot be, so files config will be staged. It will be version control, but not files. And so does it mean that so this is where I get stuck. Does it mean that I need to change location? So let me now switch to
Yeah, settings.php always needs to say where config files are.
so what I want to do is I want to now switch to my VS Code window, because I think it will be more helpful. So here, we're looking at this config, and I'm comparing it to what I see here. So here I should be seeing license, or I don't see config. See, I see core, but not config. And this is where I am bringing my questions to you guys, because I can. So am I supposed, I see files here.
Yeah, you would have to create, I think what Jen's example is doing is she creates a folder called config at that level.
Mhm. And then
I'm guessing this is how it needs to work for Pantheon. So.
no, this is staging, right? And then I have now it's more like config core. And then I'm confused because I don't have files here. And I'm not quite sure if I'm supposed to create files. or I don't.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what the files Pantheon moved means.
That
Um,
is, so when I was doing backups or something, that's, if I have to restore from backup, this is what usually Pantheon is doing, but I don't have link to files here. And this is why I'm so confused.
Yeah, you do normally have a files directory there, so it must have been deleted somehow. Not a multi-site, is it?
No, it's it is single site
Full site, yeah.
and it's reasonably simple. So I'm kind of so if I go here to terminal, not here. If I open new terminal, so here, if I do git full, it's gonna tell me that everything is up to date because I don't, because usually files are not under
Yeah.
git control. So I'm gonna follow instructions and created this here new folder called files. And then in this files, I'm just gonna trying to follow instructions and see if I do something wrong and hope that people will catch me when I do something wrong. So now here I create new folder called dev active. And then here I create config new folder test active. And new folder live. Right, so now I have the structure that is. No, it's not what it's supposed to be.
Is this supposed to already have files in it? Like, is this site already installed?
That is the question that I don't understand. Because and plus I don't think I created it in the correct place because they needed to be under config. See if I
Mhm.
new folder. No. I don't know how to. I'm gonna commit whatever I've done to Git, and then if I need to.
You haven't.
Here now, if I want to, don't think it's, see if I want to see it in Finder. No, it did create correct structure. So I don't know whether it committed it or not, but we'll probably see in a minute. So the next step that I'm supposed to do here is I need to put this back into my settings. So settings, and I keep moving here. These are my settings. Okay, so this is next step.
You already have. Is that identical to the one that's above it?
Sorry,
Mhm.
can you ask it
It's
again?
very similar.
Is that identical to the one above it?
Yes, it is. So one thing I'm not sure why. They are listed as separate steps. So that is, no, it's not. It may be, so I think this is a new part.
Hmm.
So in instructions, we're actually adding only, if I follow instructions, this is duplicate of what I have here, but it is after, but this is the part that I'm adding. So I'm going to delete this part because I don't want it to have duplicate, but I suspect that I should have this, the config directory set before I'm going in here.
Hmm.
And the only thing that I'm doing is I'm just following the URL step by step. And then to keep eye on config files, I need to add now config in the Pantheon YAML. So I go back to Pantheon YAML, and here I basically just add config directory. Okay, then it says step 4, upload files. So it says because active configuration files need to be placed in the files directory, I'll need to move them. And this is where I get confused. Maybe it's just there's, so it's the next set says download file from live site. Okay, so I'm gonna commit what I've got here.
Oh, I just pointed this out today.
Hmm.
Oh. I'm gonna use it for a year.
So-
I know, it's gonna go off.
So I'm right now on step, let me share. This, that. So I'm right now on this step. So that next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to download. I'm going to download files from my site. So this is my file. So I go here, I download files. And I am going to put them somewhere that works somewhat easy for me to find them. I'm going to put them for now in this on the top directory, though it's not. Oh, it doesn't belong there, but I'll just put there for now. Okay, so I can add more files. Okay, the name of my configuration. So this is already in place. Right, because so I'm looking at my, oh my goodness, what did I do? Did I do something bad or I didn't? 1.7, no, I think it's, okay. I hope I didn't unzip it in the wrong place. So let me review it. Finder. I'm trying to find this. And I have not unzipped them yet. Okay, it unzipped into files live and to file. So files is empty. It is unzipped right now. So all my files are now unzipped in directory files live. So this is where I don't quite understand what I'm supposed to do here. This is where I get lost. If I go here, I can open it in the FTP client, and I can get this long in the files. And I don't config. So I'm trying to find this string. Config. Okay, so I found, so this is the config. So here I'm going to record it here so I can. So this is the name of my config. This thing. And then it tells me move active configuration file. And this is where I'm not sure what I am uploading. So I'm basically creating this name inside my files directory in addition to. Okay, I guess this is where I am stuck. So I'm not sure what to do next.
I think if you're starting with a backup, then you can just copy if you've got an exact copy of the database from the live site, then you can just copy the config directly into the active folder. If you're trying to if you don't have a copy of the database and you're trying to import the config, then you have to copy it into the staging and then run the import. So have you got if you've got a backup of the database, then you don't need to run that config import. You can just copy the config into active.
Yeah, because I just wanted to make sure that so one of the challenges is that for a developer slash site builder like myself is if I'm doing things step by step, and then I get to the situation where I can't understand and things break, then I don't have the way out. And if there are a more simple way, because I do config management when I need, I know how to move things from Pantheon to local without going this path with this path. So I hope that if I follow this path, I will also put config files under Git correctly. But I feel that at this stage, I just don't know I don't quite understand what to do next. And it's more complicated. So yeah.
So
Yeah,
I've never
I do
dealt.
think.
I was just going to jump in and say I've never dealt with this issue. I do want to stress that this is all unique to Pantheon, right? I think the problem was that somehow the way Pantheon stores files is different than and caused problems with config management for backdrop, and that we've sort of come up with a solution. And in fact, because of problems like this on services like Pantheon, we've recently added a feature to Backdrop Core, which allows you to pretty much store your config in the database instead of using config files to get around these problems. Irina, have you looked at switching to using config database?
I didn't yet, but this is
Okay.
this is extremely cool feature because some of
Yeah.
my developers that I work with complained about the fact that you can't export import database and get all the stuff in. But
Right.
if I switch to this mode, I'm losing the advantage of having configuration management under Git. And I need
Yes.
to, and it is extremely important feature. So I guess I
Yeah.
will have to
Okay.
come back and report more progress once I get
You
there.
can, Joseph will be able to clarify, but I think if you do a config export, it exports as files into the staging folder. Is that right, Joseph?
Yes, that's correct. Assuming that the staging folder is set and then that is where you want it.
Yeah, so you will have the files that you can then you can then have in version management, whether it's in your staging folder or whether it's in a separate version folder. But
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if you're saying if you switch to use database config. So for example, if I were using Pantheon, I could have have it set up where on Pantheon I'm using the config in my database, but then I could export the files,
Mhm.
the config files into the and version them. Is
Mhm.
that what you're saying, Martin and Joseph?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say
With that, go ahead.
I would recommend putting your staging in version control, but not putting your active in version control, essentially.
Okay.
How do
Okay.
you synchronize that?
So you can do a config import with your so essentially you would work on your local environment, you would do a config export, and then you would commit that, you'd commit your staging to Git and push that up. And then if you go to development, I think, or no, configuration, development, and configuration manager. And yeah, so if you had, yes, so this is how you'd export it. You do a full export using this button. And did it work? Oh, is it giving you a file download? Okay. So you'd have to put that in your staging directory,
But
and then
within you setup, should I put it into config staging?
yes, and you have to extract it.
Okay. So the question is
Yeah.
then, I will need more time. I
Might
will
be.
need more time to work through this, because I will have to sign off in about 5 minutes. But I want to thank you very much for guiding me through this. I will report back my findings. I might
Yeah.
ask questions on Zulip as I struggle through. But yes,
Yeah, here, let me,
I think that there are much simpler ways, so that I think this article addresses two different issues. One is putting files under Git, and the other one is setting local instance from
mhm,
Pantheon, and I think I need to separate these two things somehow.
yeah. Also, I think Jen wrote this article a long time ago, and a bunch of things have changed since then. So I am not sure that that's the best way to do things anymore.
Okay, so in the light of this, especially given that we're trying to have Backdrop Summit at BetCamp, I would like this and next week to follow through on this thing, so we will have something like more up-to-date documentation, especially given that the configuration is here and there. And I'm also going to DrupalCon Gov. If everything is okay, I plan to be at DrupalCon Gov in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And this is one of the big topics on my list. Because these things make it easier for people to work through. So yeah. If there are some other documents that make it easier to work through this process, if you can send me, I'd be very grateful.
Mhm.
Yeah, there is on the documentation site, it's worth mentioning, there is a section on, and if I just share my screen there. So what we have on the Backdrop documentation site is we've got a section on working with config management, and this particular version that Irene has been sharing is a version based on the version staging directory, which is documented documented in here, and this might be worth trying to follow this, but it may be that with the changes to config management for database that there's a need for an updated version specifically around Pantheon.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, because one of the big reasons we added the config in the database is because of Pantheon. Since they use a distributed file system, doing a file scan is really slow on a distributed file system. And so it was on specifically if you're using Pantheon or Acquia or something like that, it's a lot faster to have it in the database.
Thank you so much, guys. I will have to leave now because of my situation, but I want to say thank you so much, and I will probably be on Zulip tomorrow with more details.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Till soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Right.
Boom.
Okay. Martin, do you want to follow that up? Do you have?
Yeah, sure. I personally like the I personally like the versioned extra directory method, which is described again. It's on the documentation site, and one of the reasons why I particularly like this is because I do have scripts that check to see if things are up to date or not, and manages things like that. So whereas the other ones can get a bit messy with Git, this one keeps track of where we are. So pretty much as it's suggested in here, I have my config outside the web root. So this config folder is at the same level as a folder like web root or doc root. And like this example, it sits it uses this notation to note that it's sitting outside of the web root. So we've got the staging and the versioned, and these are Git ignored, so these are not included, but config versioned is included. And I have these scripted, but basically what we're doing, if we're wanting to deploy from one site to another and we're just doing it with config, then delete, basically make sure the staging is clear, copy everything. Sorry, no, from the site, from the source site, you want to delete everything from the versioned directory and then copy everything from active into the versioned directory, and then add that to Git and commit, and that will then update anything that has changed in there. Then push it up. I use a private GitHub repository for to be an intermediary between my for a lot of my sites, to be an intermediary between my local and my host. I then pull from the GitHub into my host, and copy the config into the staging and run the import. Now, I did mention earlier that there are some scenarios where you don't need to do the import. So if, for example, you are if I'm if I'm deploying a live site for the first time, and I'm actually copying the database from my local and importing that into production, then I don't need to do the config import. I can just clear out the Active Directory and copy directly into there, because the part of the reason for doing the config import is to get the database to the right state. One thing that is common with any kind of config management that possibly needs to be added to this documentation is if you have different modules enabled on different environments, whether it's something like Devel, or whether it's just other modules that only exist on one environment. What you have to be aware of is the config can then be, you can run into problems trying to import the config because it won't recognize that module if that module's not enabled. So there are a few ways around that, such as making sure the modules enabled import and then disable the module if need be, or you can put certain you can keep the config file the same and put different config files in the settings local. So there's a few different ways of working around that, but this in the method that's described on here, there's a lot of manual steps, but it is perfectly possible to script this to make it a lot more straightforward, and to mean that you don't have to remember all the steps. It just happens as part of a script. So that's how I do it for all the sites that I'm responsible for.
Okay. How are we doing for time? Almost out of time. Anybody else here have any questions for Martin? So Joseph, you mentioned you're using the database management, or planning to use that on a number of your sites. I think you've already explained why, right? That just has to do with the speed on systems like Pantheon and.
Yeah, so we're not on Pantheon, but we are using Cluster, which is a distributed file system for our files directories. And so putting stuff in the database, the config files in the database is just a lot faster for us.
Okay.
And I created a little module that actually allows you to move your Active Directory between the file system and the database as well. It's called Config Mover. It's like extremely basic, and it's just like a one button, like moves all your file config into the database, or moves all your database config into the file system.
This is kind of intended to be a one-time thing, isn't it? Or is that something you might use as part of
that was originally what I developed it as, but someone did mention like a potential idea of like having a site hosted on Pantheon use the database, but then when they pull it locally, they want to export all the files to be able to directly edit them. and then
Mhm.
sort of put those in staging and push them back up. So it's like a hold the database, push files sort of loop process using this module.
We should, of course, make the caveat that it's not generally recommended to directly edit your config files, because it's quite easy to break your site if you forget something about how JSON needs to be structured. It can quite easily break the site, and particularly if it's a complex config file. So there is a caveat that generally, unless you really know what you're doing, don't go editing your config files in the file system.
Yeah.
I have to say I do it all the time, but then I only do it.
Right.
I only do it on the simple ones. I wouldn't touch a view one.
Yes, I think that's a
And
good caveat.
and
I
layouts and other complicated ones. So
I think if there's things like a text string or something in a config file, you can fix it there
yeah,
probably pretty safely where you're
yeah,
not. I think where you want to be really careful is if you're changing the structure of
yeah,
the file at all, like if you're trying to add a field by editing the JSON file, that gets real risky. But if you're just editing some data that's in there, that's probably usually okay, but always be cautious. Yes.
Mhm.
yeah.
I do touch them quite a bit, yeah. And with recipes, I do it even more especially when I'm developing recipes. I'm editing config files all the time,
Mm.
but then testing them before sharing them with people.
Mhm.
So, okay. Anybody have anything else to add on config? Does anybody have a topic for our next meeting in 2 weeks? There has been a lot of discussion in Zulip about this Drupal Forge stuff, which I thought might be a good topic for a user group meeting. Somebody mentioned we might want to wait a bit though, because it's being under a lot of things are happening right now. So I don't know if it's worth waiting or if it would be. Luke, what do you think? Is the backdrop
The
version of Drupal Forge at a stage worth talking about in a dev meet in a user group meeting?
No, I think it is.
Okay.
The Starshot piece is being heavily, is in rapid development, but the backdrop piece is relatively stable for better or worse. So you could, I don't want to fully commit just now, but you could tentatively
Okay.
suggest that in 2 weeks, so August 15th.
Okay.
That actually kind of works. I could let me sort of
I'm going to verify that.
workshop it, but yeah, maybe.
Okay. Should we pencil you in?
Yeah.
And do you think that'll take up most of an hour or?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, great. Let's pencil that in for 2 weeks from now. I'm curious to hear about what that is and how it's going.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Good. Well, I am on the road right now. Need to get going. So let's wrap up this meeting. I can hang around for just a minute afterwards if anybody has questions. But let's end the recording. Thanks everybody who joined us. Bye.